They stripped the wheels off a moving train, not as a stunt, not as sabotage, as theater. May 1902, Grand Central Terminal. A crew of uniformed porters positioned themselves along the platform as the 20th Century Limited glided to a stop. Before passengers could disembark, workmen rolled a massive crimson carpet from the platform edge to the station entrance, 20 feet wide. The exact length of the train, thick enough that footsteps made no sound. The New York Central Railroad had just invented the red carpet treatment, literally. But that wasn't the strangest part of what would become America's most celebrated train. The strange part was how completely it vanished. Not in a crash, not in a spectacular failure. It simply stopped existing, and most Americans under 50 have never heard of it. This is the story of the train that defined luxury travel for 6 decades, then disappeared so thoroughly that its absence left almost no trace. The idea arrived in 1893 during a crisis of speed. George Daniels sat in his office at New York Central headquarters, studying timetables that represented failure. The railroad's flagship New York to Chicago run took 24 hours. Pennsylvania Railroad's competing service took 26. Both railroads hemorrhaged money trying to outdo each other with incremental improvements. Daniels saw a different problem. The trains weren't slow because of engineering limits. They were slow because they stopped everywhere, carrying everyone. Mail cars coupled to passenger coaches, freight wagons mixed with sleepers, every small-town depot demanding its share of service. What if you simply said, no? The proposal he drafted was radically simple. A train that carried nothing but first-class passengers. No mail, no freight, no coach seats, no stops between New York and Chicago except for water and coal. Premium fares, premium speed, premium everything. His superiors called it commercial suicide. But Daniels had done the arithmetic. A rich businessman would pay triple for speed and comfort. 3 premium passengers generated more revenue than 10 coach riders, with half the operational complexity. The 20th Century Limited made its first run on June 15, 1902. 20 hours, New York to Chicago. 4 hours faster than anything else on rails. 5 cars, a baggage car, a diner, a parlor car, 2 sleepers. The exteriors were Pullman green with gold leaf lettering. The interiors featured mahogany paneling, electric lighting, and individual berths with real mattresses. But the real innovation wasn't visible from the platform. Every employee assigned to the Century underwent weeks of specialized training. Porters learned 73 different drink orders. Waiters memorized dietary restrictions of regular passengers. The conductor kept handwritten notes on every frequent rider, their preferred berth number, whether they liked the window shade up or down, if they took coffee at dawn. This wasn't service, it was surveillance disguised as hospitality. Within 6 months, the train sold out every departure. Within a year, New York Central added a second section, then a third. Businessmen rearranged their schedules to match the Century's timetable. The train departed New York at 2:45 p.m., arriving Chicago at 9:30 a.m. the next day. Those departure times weren't arbitrary. They were engineered for maximum productivity. A businessman could finish a full workday in New York, board the Century mid-afternoon, conduct meetings over dinner, sleep in a proper bed, and arrive Chicago fresh for a morning appointment. By 1905, the passenger manifest read like a directory of American power. Cornelius Vanderbilt III, J.P. Morgan, Charlie Chaplin, Ernest Hemingway. General Pershing. The train became so associated with success that lesser businessmen would book passage just to be seen boarding it. The platform at Grand Central became a proving ground. The red carpet appeared for every departure. Always. Pennsylvania Railroad tried to compete. They launched the Broadway Limited in 1912, threw money at the problem, built the train heavier, added crystal chandeliers in the dining car. Their marketing emphasized opulence over speed. It worked, but only partially. The Broadway Limited became a legitimate rival, but never quite achieved the century's cultural dominance. The difference was subtle, but real. The Broadway felt like a luxury hotel that happened to move. The Century felt like motion itself had been perfected. New York Central understood something Pennsylvania didn't. Luxury wasn't about chandeliers. It was about control. A passenger on the 20th Century Limited never encountered uncertainty. The train left on time with mechanical precision. Meals appeared at exact intervals. The temperature remained constant regardless of external weather. Even the quality of ice in drink glasses was monitored. This predictability was expensive. The railroad assigned dedicated locomotives to the Century, maintained to standards that seemed excessive. If a locomotive showed even minor performance issues, it was pulled immediately. Track crews walked the entire New York-Chicago route weekly, checking for rail imperfections. By the 1920s, the 20th Century Limited generated more revenue per mile than any other passenger train in America. The railroad expanded the consist to 16 cars. They added a barber shop, a secretary's lounge with typewriters, a valet service that would press suits overnight. Industrial designer Henry Dreyfuss was hired in 1938 to redesign everything. He approached the train like a product, not a service. Measured passenger movements through each car, studied how people interacted with door handles, window latches, reading lights. He discovered that passengers consistently struggled with the sleeper berth mechanisms. The existing design required a specific sequence of pulls and latches that even experienced travelers sometimes botched. He redesigned the entire berth system. One motion. Pull down, lock in place. The new exterior design abandoned Victorian ornamentation for streamlined Art Deco. The locomotives were shrouded in bullet-shaped cowlings. The cars were painted two-tone gray with a thin red stripe running the full length. At speed, the stripe blurred into a continuous line. The 1938 redesign coincided with a new speed record: 15 hours, 45 minutes. That required maintaining an average speed over 60 miles per hour for nearly 1,000 miles, including stops. During World War II, the government restricted civilian rail travel but made an exception for the Century. Military brass, defense contractors, and government officials needed fast, reliable transport. The train operated throughout the war, though with reduced amenities. That reliability mattered more than luxury. In April 1943, a blizzard shut down commercial aviation across the Midwest. Roads were impassable. The Century departed New York on schedule, arrived Chicago 17 minutes late. When the war ended, the railroad restored full service. 1948 passenger count, 175,000 annual riders. Revenue, $18 million. Operating profit, $4.2 million. The numbers looked invincible. The erosion started gradually. 1950, 168,000 passengers. 1952, 154,000. 1955, 142,000. The railroad responded by doubling down. 1956. Renovation, new carpeting, updated dining car with French cuisine, private shower rooms. The red carpet got thicker. 1957. 128,000 passengers. The problem wasn't the train. The problem was that reality had shifted underneath it. A Boeing 707 could fly New York to Chicago in 2 hours. The Century took 16 hours even at maximum speed. But the real threat wasn't speed, it was scheduling flexibility. The Century departed once daily. Fixed times. Miss it. Wait 24 hours. Airlines ran multiple flights. Miss one, catch another. Business travel was changing. Meetings became shorter, more frequent, less predictable. Why spend 16 hours on a train when a 2-hour flight accomplished the same thing? 1960. 94,000 passengers. Still profitable, barely. The cultural shift was harder to measure, but more devastating. The Century had been synonymous with success. Now it started feeling old-fashioned. Being seen on the Century no longer signaled status. It suggested you were stuck in the past. 1962. 71,000 passengers. Operating loss. $900,000. The railroad considered killing the service. But the 20th Century Limited wasn't just a train. It was the railroad's flagship product, its brand identity. Canceling it felt like admitting defeat. 1965. 52,000 passengers. Loss, $2.1 million. The final indignity arrived in 1967. The train was running so empty that the railroad began cutting cars. Some departures ran with just 4 cars. The once mighty 16-car Luxury Express reduced to a glorified commuter train. The crew still rolled out the red carpet, sometimes for a dozen passengers. On December 2, 1967, the 20th Century Limited made its final scheduled departure from Grand Central Terminal. A crowd gathered, mostly elderly people who remembered when the train mattered. The train arrived in Chicago the next morning. Porters helped the last passengers disembark. The red carpet was rolled up and stored. The locomotives were detached. The passenger cars were dispersed. There was no announcement, no ceremony. The railroad simply stopped printing the train's name on timetables. Within a year, most of the specialized equipment had been sold or scrapped. The custom china and silverware were auctioned off. Someone bought the red carpet, though records don't specify who or why. By 1970, you could ask a ticket agent about the 20th Century Limited and get a blank stare. Here's what's strange. It didn't fail. It just became obsolete. The 20th Century Limited was never beaten by a better train. It died because something else got better. The technology hadn't degraded. The service hadn't declined. What changed was everything around it. And when it died completely. The 20th Century Limited left almost nothing behind. A few pieces of china in private collections, some promotional posters, photographs, but no preserved consist sitting in a museum. The locomotives were standard models. The passenger cars were repurposed. The red carpet vanished entirely. The cultural memory faded even faster. By 1980, the phrase red carpet treatment had become completely disconnected from its origin. People used it without knowing it referred to an actual carpet rolled out for an actual train. This is what total obsolescence looks like. Not just technological replacement, but cultural erasure. The 20th Century Limited was never really about the train. It was about what the train represented. And when that representation became obsolete, there was nothing left to preserve. You can't preserve a train's departure time in a museum. You can't restore the experience of a porter remembering your coffee order. You can't rebuild the status that came from being seen on the platform. The 20th Century Limited exists now only in historical records, timetables and photographs, financial reports and newspaper archives. But the historical record can tell you what the train was, not why it mattered. None of that explains what it felt like to see that red carpet stretched out to a waiting train, or the social meaning of casually saying you were taking the Century to Chicago. The tangible elements can be documented. The intangible elements are just gone. The 20th Century Limited ran for 65 years. It's been gone for 57 years. Soon it will have been absent longer than it existed. Eventually, even the phrase red carpet treatment will become so disconnected from its origin that the connection will seem like trivia. The train that once defined American luxury travel will become a footnote. Then, not even that. This is how things vanish. Not all at once in disaster, but gradually through irrelevance, until the absence becomes normal and the memory becomes meaningless. Somewhere in storage, probably, there's still a section of that original red carpet, 20 feet wide, thick enough that footsteps made no sound. Nobody rolls it out anymore. Nobody remembers why it mattered.